Welcome to Tidal Flooding Talk. It's our production from the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in conjunction with our broadcast partners at Triax 57 News. I am meteorologist Joe Martucci. We have the whole gang here for our post 4th of July episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. We have meteorologist Dan Skeldon. We have Palma Shiles. Everybody, how's it going?
Pretty good. Happy to be here. How are you, Joe?
Well, it's always good when you celebrate another year of the United States of America. We're coming up on our 250th next year. And I don't know about you, like I live in Monmouth County, and Monmouth's like very big into planning for 4th of July next year. Like we have events planned for next year. We got like, I don't know, like reenactments. We had the Battle of Fort Monmouth here, or Battle of Monmouth, I should say, in Monmouth County, kind of by Freehold. That was a pretty big Revolutionary War battle. Further down the shore, Palma, I don't know, Atlantic County, have anything going on, for next year's 250th?
Well, I pretty much miss the 4th of July every year because my stepdaughter's birthday is July 3rd. So that's all we're really thinking about is the birthday party and everything like that. So in fact, we actually usually plan around the 4th of July because depending on what we're doing, we don't want to be, go certain places that might be too busy or people are with their families barbecuing. So we're more focused on that.
All right. Yeah, how about 4th of July next year in Allentown areas?
Not that I know of yet. And imagine 250th birthday, must be pretty big. I have a tradition, July 4th, growing up in New England. We always try to go to the Bristol July 4th parade, which is the oldest 4th of July parade in the entire country, 200 and something years old. So I'd imagine next year that's going to be the place to be in Rhode Island. Not that it's a big state and there's many places to be, but on July 4th, that's probably it. We're going to try to go next year.
Okay, all right, right on, cool. And we'll ask the same question to our guest who we have on for today, Alexa Trischler. Alexa Trischler is an Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey native, but lives in Louisiana, in New Orleans specifically, where she is a meteorologist at WWL TV. I would be remiss to say that Alexa and I have worked together twice. Our paths have crossed twice so far. Maybe they'll cross a third time. We'll see. She is a Rutgers grad, so that's always good to know. So welcome to the show, Alexa. And do you know what's going on in New Orleans for the 250th next year?
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that introduction. I haven't heard anything yet about what's happening in New Orleans for the 250, but I bet they're going to do something big, probably some fireworks, something fun. It's going to be a big deal, I'm sure, here.
I mean, listen, if anyone knows how to throw a party,
I know, right?
Yeah,
they better. They seriously better. I'm sure that they will.
Awesome. Well, listen, we appreciate having you on. We had a fairly similar episode a couple weeks ago with Matt Lanzo, who's in Houston, so on the western side of the Gulf here, talking about coastal flooding and tidal flooding. And we want to do it with you too, because I think when people think New Orleans and coastal flooding or storm surge, they think about Katrina, which at this point is, 20 years ago. So, tell us first, before we get into that, what got you interested in weather? Were you like Dan and I, we just liked it forever and ever? Did you come into it late? And how did you get to New Orleans?
I kind of came into it late, maybe like high school years. I grew up, at the Jersey Shore, like you mentioned, so experienced all 4 seasons. I loved all 4 seasons. I really loved the summertime. The summertime thunderstorms got me interested. Sandy, of course. I was still, in high school when it happened. I think that really solidified my interest in it. But I kind of came out late in the game. I watched a lot of news growing up. I always liked, media, television, movies, and also science and math a little bit. But I know we have to do a lot of math in our major. But all those things working together. And I was like, okay, I'll do meteorology. I went to Rutgers. My first job out of college, I actually worked for the Department of Environmental Protection down in Tallahassee, Florida for a year. But then I switched over to TV. I was in West Virginia for a couple of years. Then I went back to Tallahassee, back on the Gulf Coast for a couple of years for TV. And then I'm in New Orleans now for the last 2 years. So I've been here a little over 2 years now working for the CBS affiliate. And it's been really wonderful. It's a great place.
And we said it off camera, but we'll say it on camera too. You were watching our very own Dan Skeldon when you were in Egg Harbor Township.
That's right. One day when I was in high school, I shadowed Dan Skeldon for a day, and that also really made me so interested in the field, just learning from him. Even that one day just had a pretty big impact on me. So I watched some Embassy 40, watched some Philadelphia News, and really got inspired back in the day.
That's awesome. I'm blushing. I'm blushing on camera. Not sure what the lights here you can see it. No, but that's great. Yeah, I mean, I find meteorologists do get interested at that young age, whether it's in grade school, whether it's in high school or college. And you grew up in South Jersey, and that's just meteorologically a very interesting area. And you grew up at a very interesting time. I mean, I think that like 2000, 8 to 2016 timeframe with blizzard after nor'easter, after Sandy, after Irene, after Jonas. If you can't get interested in weather during that period, I don't think you can get interested in weather.
Exactly. Better said than me, for sure.
That was the golden age of. Are we allowed to say the golden age of winter storms at this point, Dan and Alexa? What do you think? I mean, I thought that was just the way it was, and it hasn't really been since then.
I think that was it. That's all we got for a while.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
great-
the
great
majority
blizzards
of
and-
the I think the majority of the meteorologists that I've met and we've had on the show have, I think almost all of them have said that they became interested in weather from when they were, even younger than 10, or at least by the time they were 15, decided that's what they wanted to do. And also a lot of them had like a specific storm too that really did it for them. Do you have something similar too?
Specific storm, I would say Sandy. I mean, I was always interested in storms over the course of my life, but I think Sandy really took me over the top. And I'm like, okay, this is an important job. This will always be an important job, and that really inspired me. So I'll go with Sandy. Maybe that's a cop-out answer, but I like that one.
Where were you for Sandy? Were you home? Did you have to evacuate? What was your Sandy story?
My house was. We didn't lose power one single time. So I was at home. I didn't, but people down the street, of course, had power out for over a month, and it was very surprising that we didn't lose power. So the power grid in New Jersey is pretty strong compared to down here. Yeah,
only the strong survive in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, we're gonna take our first break here. We're gonna spend. We have a little extra time in our second block here. We'll talk to you and get your insights on how coastal flooding compares between Louisiana and the Jersey Shore, right here on Tidal Flooding. Welcome back, everybody, to Tidal Flooding Talk. New episodes every Tuesday on our social media pages, both the New Jersey Coastal Coalitions, as well as Tri-57 and Dan Skeldon himself. We are back here with Alexa Trischler. So, Alexa, I'll ask a big question, take as much time as you need to answer it. But when it comes to coastal flooding, right, what are the attitudes of people in Louisiana towards it? And compare it to what you know growing up, near the Jersey Shore.
So down here, flooding and water is just part of the culture. I mean, people are aggravated and annoyed that they have to deal with flooding so often here, but they just accept it as an inevitability in New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana because, as many people know, New Orleans is below sea level. I don't know if you've heard, party below sea level. It's surrounded by water. So we, of course, are protected in New Orleans by levees, floodgates, flood walls, things of that nature. But there are parts of Southeast Louisiana, just right outside of New Orleans, that are not protected. So even though New Orleans is protected within this hurricane risk reduction system with the walls it doesn't matter because we get these really heavy daytime thunderstorms and frontal storms that come in and dump several inches of rain. And flooding is just an issue here. It's a pretty big issue that we face, almost on a monthly basis, sometimes a daily basis. So people are, annoyed by it and they're upset with it. Sometimes their homes are very, severely impacted by these daytime thunderstorms that come in. Their cars are flooded out. Their days are just completely thrown into upheaval. But they just accept it, and it makes people pretty strong and resilient here because of how severe the flooding problems are. And I will say, New Orleans is, a unique place, unlike anywhere else. Since it is below sea level, there's all these different measures in place. We have pumps that pump water out of the city into a canal system that dump that water into Lake Pontchartrain, and then that water goes into the Gulf. So there's all these different mechanisms to get water out of the city, but sometimes the infrastructure is old, it fails. So flooding is just kind of an inevitability here that people accept and kind of a sense of humor about it. So I will say Louisiana is just the most unique place, and people are so sensitive to water and flooding and weather, and it's just part of the culture here. Whereas in New Jersey, yes, of course, we do have to deal with flooding, throughout the course of the year, coastal flooding from storms, tropical systems, things of that nature. But I feel like it's not so prevalent there as it is down here, but it's still a problem, of course. And I think people are maybe a little bit more upset about it in New Jersey because it sometimes can catch them off guard. And I will say one of the most common things between the two, New Jersey and Louisiana, is the coastal flooding. We get a stiff, persistent onshore wind outside of the levee system here, and we've got road closures on a perfectly sunny day, which is the same thing happening in Atlantic City on the Black Horse Pike. So that's really one of the top similarities between both.
Alexa, being on the Gulf is and just being in that tropical air mass.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that the fresh water flooding from thunderstorm runoff. Is that more common? Is that more of an issue for more people than the coastal flooding? And I mean, because obviously thunderstorms and the heavy rain can hit, anywhere, while that coastal flooding may be limited to those less population areas outside of like, protection system. So is freshwater flooding more prominent than tidal flooding in coastal Louisiana?
I think 100%. So freshwater flooding from heavy rain, from storms, from tropical systems is really the biggest problem because the levee system can't do anything about it. The pumps have to work overtime to get the water out of the city. And sometimes the pumps either fail or there's just too much water overwhelming the pumps. So freshwater flooding is really a significant problem here. Even over the last week, we've had it where you get just flooding just across the city where you get closures, and unfortunately sometimes people drive through them and it becomes a mess. But sometimes we really just accept it and laugh it off and make sure people are notified. We do our best to cover all of these weather events here, and it becomes very common in the summertime where we're covering these almost all the time, so people know where to avoid and how to go about their day because it is just so common here.
Now, whether it's here in New Jersey or New Orleans, do you find that there's any generational differences with how people may respond to flood alerts or warnings?
That's a good question. All these great questions. So, after Katrina, I feel like the whole attitude of the city changed. I mean, the city lost over half its population, and some people never came back, and some people did. And the people that did really want to build the city back to what it was. And I think, over the course of generations, and they have experienced horrible flooding, their family has, they just take it very seriously, and they're not ready to leave their home. They're gonna ride out the storms. If they're told to evacuate, they will, but they're gonna come back. So I think just flooding really becomes part of kind of the DNA here, like I mentioned. So I think people just take it seriously, but also take it in stride and take it with a grain of salt here. And whereas I guess in New Jersey, and I know you guys are focusing more on New Jersey in your line of work. How would you say that people kind of respond to flood alerts?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, that people didn't want to leave. That's what you were referring to. Our last guest from Scott's Dock had said that he did not leave for Sandy because his mom at the time was alive and she ran Scott's dock, and we asked, would you leave today if the same thing happened? And he still said, I'm stubborn and I don't think that I would. I think
Yeah,
the challenge that, city officials face and emergency management, first responders, it's like, what do we do to get people to leave? But
that's very similar here. It's the same thing. Some people are willing and ready to go, while others don't want to leave their homes. They just don't want to do it. But I think after they see what can happen here, the devastation that can happen here in the New Orleans area, so people are more inclined to leave. I think, at least the younger generation.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to. Is Katrina something that's talked about, daily? Like Sandy's kind of talked about here, or are we past it? I mean, I got to imagine if you're under the age of, I would say 30, you don't probably have too much firsthand experience with Katrina. You might have lived through it, but not how to do much in terms of decision making.
I do think people talk about it a lot. It's just part of the everyday, almost. Just because everyone, I feel like most people there have had some sort of experience with it. Even if they were kids, they had to leave and move to Texas for a while, or move to a different part of the country for a while, or if their homes and lives were just completely destroyed. So, and there are still things that that are not 100% the same that it used to be before the storm hit, which a lot of people know about that. So, and 20 years later, there are still things that just have never been the same since. So, it is part of the everyday.
Is there a more recent measuring stick? Like everyone knows about Katrina, but have you had a tropical system or maybe one of those freshwater, 1 in 100 year events type thing where, maybe the younger generation more
Yeah.
solidified in their memory and that's kind of their motivation to act when flooding happens?
Yeah, you guys may know that Hurricane Ida in 2021 was similar. It wasn't. It didn't impact the city of New Orleans as much. It impacted more like the bayou regions, which is just southeast or south, just really directly south and southwest of the city of New Orleans. So the bayou parishes, which are not protected by any floodgates, were heavily impacted by Ida. Ida sort of tested the levee system, which was reinforced after Katrina, and it withstood Ida. But Ida certainly has put, and it happened on the same day, August 29th, as Hurricane Katrina.
That's
So
scary.
that's
Yeah.
August 29th. Everyone's like, oh God, I can't do August 29th. We just need to get over this day. But I think Ida was a refresher to people to know, to remind them this is serious. This can happen here anytime. And you always have to be prepared for any sort of storm. And you may lose everything, and it may take a long time to recover.
And it's
And
funny you mentioned Ida because Ida was a storm that brought perhaps the best example of freshwater flooding to PA and New Jersey. I mean, I think there were more deaths up here. And like, you had 10, 12 inches of rain in a very short amount of time. And, we talk about tidal flooding all the time here on Tidal Flooding Talk, but, freshwater flooding can be just as impactful, if not more so, because you're just adding so much rain so quickly into the system. And Ida was a horrible system for PA and New Jersey.
Right, exactly. And sometimes we get these summertime thunderstorms, or even if we have a stationary front that sets up and we just get slammed with several inches of rain throughout the day. People will come on our channel 4, or my channel is channel 4, WWL, and we interview them and they say, this is the worst flooding we've ever gotten. This is worse than Katrina. So that just goes to show you, even some people say that the flooding that we get from these storms sometimes throughout the year is worse than Hurricane Katrina.
Very interesting. All right, we're going to take our last break here. We'll be back on the other side here at Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
welcome back. You're watching Tidal Flooding Talk, and the New Jersey Coastal Coalition would like to remind our viewers to talk to your kids about flood safety. Make a family plan. Teach children where to go and what to do during a flood warning. Being prepared is a family effort.
Awesome. And we are back with Alexa Trischler. Alexa, you brought up a point I wanted to dive into a little bit more. You said a lot of the on the bayou, right, away from New Orleans,
Yeah.
not as much protection. Why is that? Is it just because is it rural? I don't need you to get into politics, but does the government maybe not focus there as much? Like what leads to that? Because I've seen on Google Maps that area, it looks very, very flat.
Yeah, it's very rural, number one, but there are still some, decent sized communities there. But, it's mostly water. There's not a lot of land to build these prominent structures on. I feel like it would be very difficult. That's a good question. I should probably do some more digging to see why isn't there a levee system down there? But I think it's just mostly comprised of bayou and not a lot of land mass to cover. So I think it would be more difficult. But there are so Lake Pontchartrain is massive. So New Orleans is south of the lake, and on the north shore of the lake, that's also not protected. But I'm not sure exactly why. I guess it's just that it could be money, it could be many things. I'm not exactly sure why, but maybe it's too big of an area to protect. That's actually a very good question. I don't know the exact.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, and you bring up the North Shore, it kind of negates my point, but I just wanted to say, like, it kind of reminds me of like a Cumberland County situation in New Jersey where the Delaware Bay Shore there is not very protected. And most residents want protection that live there year round, but there's not many people that, it's a whole thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
Dan, you can go ahead, Palma. That was just my thought.
No, that's a good question. I'm ask some people about that.
If you could implement one coastal resilience measure from one region to the other, what would it be?
That is a good question. I guess it'd be hard to protect the Jersey Shore, but they already have measures in place with the beach restoration throughout the year. So I feel like they do, both places do such a good job at trying to protect their people the best that they can and protect their property. I think here they might do it the same amount up in New Jersey, but here there's an emphasis on preparing for bad weather a lot. I mean, we're always talking about it all the time. It could be from storms, hurricanes, tropical systems, and just making sure people know what to do in case there is a flood, in case there is a risk of flooding. I think maybe implementing that more is always a good idea, even, for the Jersey Shore. Maybe people aren't as aware of flooding, even though they live along the coast. Maybe they think that they're fine because it's, the beach protects them and everything's, hunky-dory, but maybe just more communication to how to better prepare for bad weather, bad flooding.
Alexa, when residents in New Orleans and in the surrounding areas rebuild after Katrina, Jersey we have a life-changing event. They raise building standards. What do they do in New Orleans? Do they focus more on building up the levees and building up the protections and not so much the buildings within the city limits and within those protection areas? Or is it both? So where do they focus more of their efforts as far as that resiliency goes?
Yeah, so any of the homes outside of the levee protection system are raised just like the homes are on the Jersey Shore. So they are raised up. Someone in South Mississippi, which we also cover, is built a home that's supposed to withstand hurricane, like a bad hurricane. I have to look into the details of this, but it's really built up to withstand like a very powerful hurricane. So, but that's just one case. But anyway, in the levee protection system in the city of New Orleans in the metro area, people have built back the best that they can, and they have improved the levee system and the flood, protection walls and the floodgates. But there are parts of the city that haven't really been rebuilt. The eastern part of New Orleans East, really hasn't seen a whole bunch of recovery. Some parts of it have, but kind of where the certain neighborhoods that maybe more people live in, they have made just improvements to the structures slightly, but nothing crazy. I mean, there's no armored buildings to protect from storms. I think it's just cross your fingers and hope things don't get destroyed in the next hurricane here.
I think that home you're talking about, is that Circle home?
I think so. It's somewhere in Mississippi.
You know what I'm talking about, Dan? I see you're shaking.
Yeah, I think it's category 4. I think. I've seen it. They've done some cool features on it, and you know, if they can manufacture that, that's great. It's just a cost and replicating that throughout the entire East Coast. I think that's going to be challenging, but it's pretty cool. Even if they can build one home that can withstand 100% a Category 4 hurricane.
Yeah, I know there's a big companies here that do really great window restoration here, and they put all these new like state-of-the-art windows in people's homes to try to do the best that they can to withstand the storms. But other than that, it's just pretty typical hurricane kind of risk. What am I trying to say? They build risk management. Yeah, they build homes up to code here to the best possible way they can.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Alexa, this went by way too fast. We were saying it off camera. We'll say it on camera here. But we do got to wrap up. We're going to end like we do every week with the one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. I will go first. How about Free Slurpee Day? That's coming up, July 11th, Friday, July 11th. When I was a kid, teenager, how about that? For like 3 years in a row, my friends and I, we tried to go as many 7-Elevens as we could in one day. I think our record was 9 in 1 year. And that was a lot. When you add up those 7.11 ounce Slurpee cups, times 9, that's a lot of Slurpee you're drinking in one day. So that's what I got. Mama, you're next.
Yeah, I can't imagine how everyone was behaved after all that sugar, That's
we were just crazy kids back then. Crazy kids, Paul, tearing up the streets.
Well, now that you're saying that, it's got me thinking about the Yum Yum truck in Margate. I don't know what they do to make this water ice, if it even is considered water ice, but it's different and I really like it. And now I think that's what I'm going to need to get in the very near future. There
is like that water ice, Polish ice, Italian ice, difference. And there is a difference between the three. I'm not educated enough to explain it. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I'll keep with the food theme. And since we have Alexa on, I'm going to be talking about New Orleans food. I spoke at the National Hurricane Center conference down there, and that was the best part, besides the conference, was the food down there. It was absolutely amazing, and I can't recreate it up here, and love it, miss it, and we'll go back to New Orleans just for the cuisine.
The food is delicious here. The food, the culture, the people. First and foremost, the people are the best. And speaking of the icy thing, so they have snowballs here. That's what they like to eat. They're like snow cones, but they call them snowballs. But they spell everything the Louisiana way. Like they spell snow like S-N-E-A-U-S. So any no is spelled like the Louisiana way. What was the favorite thing that you had food-wise down here when you were here, Dan?
It was some sort of jambalaya or something Cajun. I was there for 3 nights and no bad meals at all. It was incredible food, the best cuisine I've had.
Yeah, it's delicious.
If this is going to be our segment from now on, food, then I don't know if we could have the show before I have dinner because now I'm really hungry.
One last point on New Orleans food. On my Mount Rushmore of United States Italian places, Irene's.
Really?
Yes.
I still haven't gone there yet.
You didn't? Oh my God, Alexa! I got to come back down to New Orleans just so we can go there. I guess you know what? I think you were when I was at the American Meteorological Society annual conference. I saw Alexa at the studio. She did great. I think maybe we invited you, but I think you were busy that day.
Working or something.
Yeah, you were working or something like that. But oh my God, it's fantastic. All right, Alexa, tell everybody where they can follow your work and see what's going on with you and the TV station.
Yep, so I'm with WWL Louisiana, Channel 4 CBS affiliate in New Orleans. You can watch me there. You check out our website. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I'm not good with social media, but I'm on all the social medias.
Perfect. All right. Well, we appreciate the time, Alexa. Thanks so much for hopping on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Always good to have some Jersey natives who are elsewhere on the show. That's right. We'll be back with you with another episode next Tuesday. In the meanwhile, thanks for tuning into Tidal Flooding Talk, and we will talk with you then. Take care, everybody.